Welcome to the Men's Lifeline Academy, where we bring on stellar men who feel like a zero, until they recognize the hero within themselves. When they started as a cub, now they're a lion. And I'm your host. My name is Zach Goodman, and today I have the founder of Life Alignment Coaching. Tyson Jones is in the house today.
Zach, buddy, what's up, man? I'm so glad we're finally doing this.
I know. I mean, all the positive messages you promote, especially with the social services, the social workers, and trying to use a lot of the techniques that you've learned to help promote people's life. Because a lot of times, well, people don't necessarily understand the struggles and hurdles that people are dealing with inside. A lot of times they're just like, well, just get over it, pick up yourself by the bootstraps, and then push along. So, Tyson, before we get into all the goodness of how you're coaching people, taking people to the next level, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right, man. Well, like I said, I kind of feel like I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can. But basically, my life kind of started, and it's in two halves. So, first half was baseball, and then so growing up playing baseball, went to college to play baseball. My entire identity was baseball, and then injury cut that shorter than I would have liked, and of course, that was like my whole identity at that point in time.
Mhm.
So went into really dark spot. Like I was in the wilderness for a couple of years, and so
Oh,
that obviously that'll shape you for the good. So then ended up going back to school and finished up with a master's degree in sport and exercise psychology. Ran a lot of gyms, opened some gyms, some corporate gyms, as well as some private gyms. So spent a lot of time in the health and wellness field, which I loved. That was fantastic, man. Working with people and helping them get healthier was great. Really enjoyed the putting programs together for people. But what I realized that I liked actually getting people to do the program more than I liked putting the program together.
ah.
So like everybody's
Mhm.
like, well, what's the best workout for fat loss? Like, well, the best workout for anything is the workout you're going to do. So no, I could put together the perfect workout. If you're not going to do it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So that's where the sports and exercise psychology really started to speak to me. Then I was kind of started chasing money and got into some sales jobs, which I enjoyed, but it wasn't doing it for me. No matter how much money
Mhm.
you're making, the purpose just isn't there. So
Oh, sure.
uh had a bad weekend thinking about having to go to work, man. Had a really bad case of the Sunday scaries one day, and I was like, I'm not going back. And so I just called that Monday morning and put my 2 weeks in, and fell into social work in that while I was in sales, I was volunteering at a men's homeless shelter here in Louisville, Kentucky. And really enjoyed that. Love talking to those guys and seeing them a couple times a week and just getting all those stories, man. If you meet one homeless person, you've met one homeless person. That's it. They've all got a different story. They all come from different places. They're all, for the most part, most of them are pretty cool. Um, and then when I wasn't working, I just sent an email to the agency that I work at now for a job that I was not qualified for.
Mm.
And just said, hey, I've been volunteering at, in a place sort of like this for a while. If there's anything I can do, let me know. I've been doing that for 3 years now. I help with benefits, getting people on Medicaid,
Mhm.
mostly spend time in different jails and getting people signed up for Medicaid so they can go to drug treatment, which I know you know a lot about.
I do.
And then missing the fitness. Fitness has always been a big part of my life, but I really started to notice that social workers have they give their life energy away all day, every day, and
Yes,
they
we do.
don't do enough to keep their own cup full. And so that's where life alignment coaching and wellness started, was trying to get with especially social workers, because that is the field that I'm in now and those are the folks that I'm around all the time, just trying to make sure that they understand that they can't take care of their clients that they're dedicated to if they don't take care of themselves. I mean, eventually they're going to burn out. The churn's going to happen, and then they're stuck and their client's stuck. And I don't like for people to have to do that.
Well, I just want to say Thank you for definitely all your service, both being like in the social work field and actually dedicating your life to even social workers and recognizing there's a lot of burnout there. And that's kind of a topic that gets brought up about all the time. I hear about work quite a bit in my day job about burnout. How would you kind of define burnout?
Burnout is just, as far as I'm concerned, it's when they've just emptied themselves. They are overextended. They say yes way too often. They're not taking any time for themselves. They're not getting enough rest. They're not eating right. They're not exercising. They're not getting outside. And you can only do that so long until you're you're just completely melted inside. Like your brain is just, it's just scrambled. Your anxiety starts to go through the roof. And if you don't start taking care of yourself, you're definitely going to burn out. And it's just chronic stress beyond being able to handle it anymore.
That's an excellent definition. When you fully like empty yourself, where you're basically driving, you're almost basically on the gas tank on E, and you're like teeter-tottering in that line. So how do you kind of like outreach to social workers that with life alignment coaching, how do you specifically target social workers? Because a lot of times, even though a lot of times they might seek therapy out themselves, there's still probably that little bit of that. Do you still find like a little bit of a stigma about mental health professionals seeking mental health profession?
Sure. And I've dealt with some anxiety in my past, so I
Mhm.
can kind of see it and smell it on people. And there's nothing wrong with that. And like you said, a lot of people they start to get they beat themselves up about it, and that's, you shouldn't do that. Uh, Being in the social work field and then trying to run a secondary business that's related to that,
Mhm.
it's kind of a tightrope to walk, because when I go to meetings, if I'm at a meeting and I'm representing my social work agency and I see someone or someone says something that kind of triggers my life alignment mind, I
Yeah.
have to take one hat off, put the other one on, and I've made sure to make that clear with, my boss of what my boundaries are with that.
Mm.
So if it's at a meeting that we don't have time to talk, I can just like hand them a card and say, "Hey, man, I heard you make this comment. I know exactly where you're at. I can." I normally don't like just offer up services immediately. Like I'm just like, "Hey, man, I've been that far before. I can help you out. I'm continuously reading books on fitness and wellness and mental health. And
Mhm.
if even if it's a matter of just like passing on a book title or an author or a blog post or something that I read, a lot of times that's all somebody needs. That's the only kick in the pants they need. They just read that one thing, and maybe that kind of starts that flywheel spinning. And then once that flywheel spinning, it's easier to keep going than it is to start from nothing.
Yeah, and that's why so many people do so much reading because they're always looking for that one idea, that one technique that's really going to impact their life. So, what are some go-to books that you've read that's really made an impact in your life that you like to pass along?
Man, this new one that I've been reading is Gabrielle Lyons, and
Cool.
she talks about the absolute necessity for muscle mass as we age, and it's called what's it called? It's called Forever Strong, and she really brings receipts. I mean, anybody that's been in the fitness industry at all knows that the more muscle mass you have, to an extent, obviously, the better off you're going to be as you
Mhm.
age. And I mean, muscle mass is the fountain of youth. And so she breaks it down extremely thoroughly without it being overly scienced. You can
Mm.
read it and you understand, like, even if you don't know maybe the acronyms that she's talking about,
Mhm.
it's not necessary. You could look it up if you really want to, but if you don't look it up, it doesn't matter. You get what she's saying. And I got turned on to her from the Huberman podcast.
Oh yeah, that podcast gets mentioned from time to time on here on X and everywhere because he's a Harvard neuropsychologist, I want to say.
Yes, something like that. One of those big long ones, and that neural's in there for sure.
Well, I know he talks a lot about the dopamine and the different chemicals in the body, but he's gotten really popular over the last couple of years.
He has. I felt like he was another one of those quote overnight successes quote that he's been killing it for a long time, and then he just kind of popped up all of a sudden, and you feel like he came out of nowhere, but you know that he put in the work, and has done all the writing and reading and everything he needs to be where he deserves to be.
All you have to do is look at how many articles he produced and how many videos, and like, oh yeah, he's been here for a little bit of time.
And
Like going back to
he had a guy on there not too long ago too, just speaking of wellness and aging well, that I'd been turned on to a while back, called Stuart McGill, and he's a back specialist.
oh
And he wrote a book called The Back Mechanic. And if anybody's got any low back pain, especially nowadays that we're so sedentary and we sit for so long, that back pain is a lot of people have it. And
right.
The Back Mechanic, that book is fantastic. It's got some very simple exercises and routines to go through that anybody can do to alleviate back pain. He was another one that I'd heard of before, but when I heard him talk on the Huberman podcast, I had to check him out again.
That's so true because I know for at least for the last decade, they're saying a sedentary lifestyle is just as bad as smoking cigarettes. Now, I know they've been saying that for it feels at least a decade at this point, especially as we get more advanced as a society. A lot of times, a lot of the, maybe sometimes the better paying jobs or there's a lot of sitting jobs.
And it's even getting worse. I mean, you don't, uh, the phones, I remember I posted on Twitter not too long ago that I don't know what's worse for us, our phones or our food. And the phones, somebody came back with obviously a very enlightening things like, the phone can be a tool and you can use it for good, obviously, especially on that platform,
Mm-hmm.
that it's, you're not just mindlessly scrolling a lot of times. And then, so the food now is most of the food we have is calorie dense and nutritionally void. And it's a bad scene, hyper palatable. So you just want to eat as much of it as you can. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else from time to time. I'll fall off that wagon.
Oh, sure. That's why I try to follow the 80-20 rule as much as I can and not have any junk food in the house because I know personally for me, if there's junk food in the house, it's going to be gone.
Mm-hmm. It only takes one, takes one Oreo, and then the next thing you know, the sleeve's gone, and you're like, man, come on, dude, you know better than that.
Well, that's why they say hindsight's 2020. I would say though, since you're a social worker, I'm sure you've gone to like quite a few conferences. How do you handle where, actually, ironically, I think I was talking about this earlier today at work, where a lot of times when we're at a conference, there's a lot of junk food.
Mm-hmm.
There's the donuts, there's the sugar, and we're all mental health professionals where it's kind of like you have to take a second, kind of to take a step back at it because you're like, wait a second, this food's going to make me tired. It's going to make me sluggish. So kind of part of your life alignment, do you talk about like the nutrition when people have to go to like a conference?
About when you're at a conference like that, what I've kind of figured out is the best thing I can do is just lead from the front. And if I'm going to be the one preaching health and wellness, then I probably need to be, and I want to be because it's going to make my day better. But I need to be in the gym that morning at the hotel before the conference starts and get a good workout in. And that way I know that I'm going to be my best through the rest of the day. And as far as like getting a workout in the morning, for me, it sets my entire day up. If I miss it, if I miss my morning workout, whether I'm at a conference or whether I'm here, the chances of me making poor food choices are at least doubled and maybe tripled. But if I get up in the morning, 5 o'clock, I'm at the gym by 5:30, leave the gym at 6:45, like that is the perfect start to my day. And if I've got that win already in for the day, I'm not going to mess it up with food. And so as far as like being at a conference or something like that, just leading from the front, get up, get my workout in. I know that it's good for me. I know I'm going to feel better. I know that my attention is going to be better for the day. I'm going to learn more. And I'm also going to continue to lead from the front when we go through the buffet line. If it's, no telling what it is, there's going to be a salad there. There's going to be a protein there. I'm going to be able to make something up. And it might not be just absolutely score 100, but like you said, it's going to be an A meal for sure.
No, I like that point of view of kind of setting your day up for success and being intentional and having that insight about who you are. And you know that if you get the workout in, you're going to have a better day nutrition wise. How the day goes is how the day goes. However, it's being intentional in the time of getting up. So I guess the biggest question is how do you defeat the snooze alarm? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who's watching this video is like, man, I love your energy, Tyson. Like you're just there. You're like speaking gold right now. However, it's like that snooze alarm that's like keeps me prevented from getting up early to exercise to work out. So, how would you kind of help someone like in that kind of aspect? Because I'm sure it's tempting to hit snooze.
It is. If you live with your significant other and you set your alarm clock across the room and you have to get up to turn that thing off, that's going to be an extra motivator to get out of bed and go turn that off. Because if you don't, you're gonna get elbowed real hard. Is my bet. So set your alarm clock across the room, whether you're sleeping with anybody else in the bed with you or not. Otherwise, one that's really worked for me, and I wish I could give credit where it came from, but when the alarm goes off, or a lot of times you wake up at the same time every day, you'll start to wake up before the alarm ever goes off. So reach over, turn the alarm off so it's not going to go off, and then count backwards from 3. You just kind of 3, 2, 1, get up. And then it sounds kind of goofy and it sounds overly simple, but it works. And especially it gets to be habitual. You know that it's time, and it's kind of like a blast off countdown. You're just like 3, 2, 1. All right, man, let's do it. And you might not feel like it, but by the time you get up, you get your gym clothes on, you're in the rig on the way to the gym, you're going to be ready. The music's going to be rocking, and you're going to be ready to get your workout in. And it just gets to be habitual.
No, that's key. I know that there's one psychologist, I can't remember her name, but or maybe an actress, I can't quite remember at this time, but she literally did like a NASA countdown, like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She's going, and ever since that moment, she's like, it sounded weird, but she did it. Another thing too that I've heard of is you're actually training your brain, not that it's not important. The more times you hit snooze, you're saying this task isn't that important.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just reinforcing your mind to not do the things that are important or that are going to be beneficial to you. Have you read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear?
I have. It's one of my favorites. It's a great one.
I love his book. It's definitely in the top 5. Because what he says is get used to setting your alarm clock 15 minutes before you want to get up. So, and actually have like a realistic idea when you get up. So if you are typically getting up at 6:30, try 6:15. Build up that confidence, that esteem.
Yeah, and then like you said, and as he speaks too, like it just gets to be habitual, and those neural pathways, they start to groove deeper and deeper, and it works it works the opposite way too. Like you're saying, if you start to hit that snooze, that starts to be a neural pathway,
right?
In that, oh, I can hit this snooze and it's not that big a deal. And sometimes it kind of clashes with the thought of, show yourself some grace, treat yourself more like you would treat your best friend. Don't beat yourself up if you do if you do mess up, but also you got to hold yourself to a higher standard than you hold anybody else as well. And so, like, if you would give your best friend a hard time about hitting the snooze, then you got to give yourself at least that much of a hard time about hitting snooze. And you definitely can't do it 2 days in a row. Like, one day is not ideal, but 2 days is a trend, and that's not good.
No, it's not, because then that's how habits get formed, and then that's the neural pathway. Is when habits get formed, you're making this association with this connection, and before you know it, 2 months go by and you're still hitting snooze.
Exactly, and we were just talking about the flywheel, man. Getting that flywheel started, once it gets going. I can't remember the numbers on it, but there was another analogy exactly like the flywheel. Something about getting a train moving. It takes like 50,000 horsepower to get it to 30 miles an hour. But then once you have a train going 30 miles an hour, it only takes 30 horsepower to keep it going. So that works positive and it works negative. Your flywheel can get going in a negative momentum as well.
And it's so easy too. So what are some key things that you tend to focus on in your life alignment? Like, I know it's doing what you say you're going to do, right? Leading the pack.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some other kind of core habits and teachings that you foster Any like principles that you really attain to?
Uh, well, we've talked about nutrition. We've
Yep.
talked about the exercise. Mindfulness, like having some quiet time, is huge, especially when you're in the social work field and you're bombarded with negative energy all day long.
Hmm.
And so having some time to step away and just sit for 10 or 15 minutes. Now, whether you want to do like a full on guided meditation, if you just want to take your shoes off and curl them in your office carpet, whatever you want to do, man, if you need to give yourself at least 10 or 15 minutes every day and just be quiet and just kind of, if you want to do some box breathing, or if you have a different breathing exercise that you like, just make sure that you hang up your do not disturb sign on your door and take your 15 minutes, man. It's not selfish to take your 15 minutes. I promise. They can, whatever problem might happen in that 15 minutes, you can fix it when you're done. And you can fix it better when you're done than you would be if you don't. Um, Getting out in nature and having some hobbies are, something else too, that you gotta take your mind off work from sometime. If you wake up every morning with with no time left to spare, and then you're stressed getting to work because you're running late, and then
Hmm.
you're working all day and you don't take any time for yourself there, and then you come home and then you work some more. Like, if you don't have anything else that gets you, that floats your boat, you need to find something, because you can't just work all the time and burn the candle at both ends. You got to have some sort of release, some sort of a pressure valve. And then boundaries. You got to be, the best time to set boundaries is immediately, and then the next best time is right now. If you do not set boundaries and make sure that they're clear and stick to them, you will absolutely get run over. And that's just, you can't have that, man. You gotta take care
Right.
of yourself, because you can't take care of yourself. If you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else.
And that's so important too, and especially when you have to put yourself first sometimes. I'm sure you're familiar with Anna Freud and altruism being a defense mechanism.
No, I'm not. What's that about?
Oh, okay. So cool. I love doing some education. Okay. So with altruism, we know that's when you kind of want to help somebody. Like you kind of
Hmm.
put your needs aside to help somebody else. So Anna Freud, who's the daughter of Sigmund Freud,
Okay.
says this: altruism becomes a defense mechanism when you selfishly take care of other people because you can't take care of yourself.
Oh, okay.
So it's
I,
that selfish part of like, listen, I don't have control of my life. Like my life is a mess. I don't know what to do. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take care of your life. I'm gonna dedicate my life to getting you better, to healing you.
mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Like, it's kind of like it's a readily available excuse that
Right.
you can make for yourself, and even though that you're not doing what you should be doing.
Exactly. And like a lot of times you hear about a lot of times social workers on that burnout, like they're putting their heart and soul into someone who's struggling, going through trauma, depression, anxiety, and they don't necessarily know what to do. And then so you're kind of scrambling, reading articles and doing the best you can to help someone who's literally drowning in the ocean and trying to, pour their bucket where their bucket's already empty. But your bucket's being empty at the same time. So it's trying to find that balance, that boundary of what can I do?
Hmm. Interesting.
So so when someone's kind of like that, like what do you tend to focus on to help that social worker?
Just, if someone is that gung ho about helping other people, then you almost have to do an end around, and it'll sound bad coming out of my mouth, I guess, but almost use that against them. Like,
Hmm.
you want to help this person so bad, and I agree. Like, it's your job, and you're probably an empath, and it's something that you're very serious about, and something that you love to do. You're stressed out. You see it. We see, like, you cannot continue down this path. You will not. If you continue down this path, you will not be able to help this person anymore. And
Right.
so, come at it from that angle and be like, I know that you mean well, but you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And it's almost if you have your foot on top of theirs because you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, which is then going to affect them as well.
Yeah, and to kind of challenge that a little bit, I tend to focus on what's helped me, both professionally and everything, is impact versus change.
Okay.
So, in kind of challenging, but instead of just necessarily putting it on them, which in that retrospect, it's more of a you can't change that person, right? How meaning change, meaning expecting to go from having no anxiety, not using the coping skills, to using the coping skills and doing everything that you recommended. Whereas impact is a progression based thought process where I'm going to make sure this person feels cared for, that they're, and then you praise them and validate them when they begin using a coping skill. So if they went from not using a coping skill, being in a bad relationship, unhealthy, and then they begin to recognize it, that's impact, right? When they begin to have that understanding.
Mm-hmm.
When they begin to use their coping skills one at a time out of 100 times, and then two, then three, and how it's a gradual progression of skill development.
Sure. They all build on
Yeah.
each one builds on the next.
So that's how I kind of differentiate it, because change is expecting someone to all of a sudden literally change, right? Go from basically a caliper to a butterfly
Mm-hmm.
versus the progression. So I see the impact as that progression base, not necessarily like, oh, this person's healed, they're all better. So
It's like the Jim Gaffigan bit about going to the gym, and he was in the gym and he was the only fat person there. And then he said,
yeah,
all these fit people are here. And I'm like, you guys are done. What are you still doing here?
right.
You're fit, you're done. And obviously that's not the way it works. So kind of like,
It's like that mindset, yeah.
okay. I like that impact versus change.
Yeah. Because that way it helps tailor your level of expectations too.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're working with someone who's been in like a traumatic experience for 30 years, expecting them all of a sudden to be recovered, healed in a day, let's say in a year.
Right. And when I'm
It's like,
dealing with my clients, like when I'm dealing with my social work clients,
yeah,
then obviously that's a total different beast than when I'm dealing with my social worker clients.
correct.
And obviously that's for a million different reasons. I know that a lot of my social work clients aren't capable of any change. They're lucky to hang on every day.
Mhm.
And so that's what, when you and I were talking about this, it's the good news in social work is few and far between. So you gotta like really celebrate those super small wins.
Right.
And then we also need to celebrate any sort of small wins with our social worker clients as well. Like you said, I mean, if they shooting to get up and get to the gym 4 days a week, but they only make it once, hey man, once is better than none. And that
Right.
you did none last week. So if you do one every week this month, that's four times better than you did. And it's a great start. And that's worth celebrating.
Exactly. See, that's that level of impact I was discussing. Like exactly it. Versus change being okay. What do you mean you're lazy, you're not getting anything, and now all of a sudden like you're highly motivated every day, you're maybe not a 10, but let's say you're a 6 or a 5. And you're basically doing such a radical transformation process.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, you
and
got to
kind of
crawl before you walk.
exactly. And kind of keeping the focus on men, because that's what this channel is about. How many, because we know there's not a lot of male social workers, but what is your general like clientele in your life alignment? Is it mostly female? Is it mostly male? Like
It's
what is it?
it's definitely mostly female. Like you
Okay.
said, I mean, I don't know what the number is, but it's got to be 80% female dominated. Would you
Sounds
say?
about right. Maybe 90, 80.
Yeah, it's mostly females. And so that's that's a learning experience. You can't come at females like you can come at males. It's like one of my favorite memes is the two girls that are standing there, and one says, hey, am I fat? And she says, no, baby, you're beautiful. And then the two guys standing there and he says, hey, am I fat? And his buddy says, bro, I know 5 fat people and you're 4 of
I know exactly which one it
them.
is.
And so, you have to keep that mindset. And, but it's not usually, I don't lead with physical fitness as far as that's just one tool
Okay,
as far
perfect.
as getting your life in alignment as a social worker, like just realizing that self-care is not selfish. Like that is step number one.
Mhm.
And so whether that means getting fit or whether that means getting a hobby or whether that means meditating once a day, whether that means um, getting out of bed and reading a passage from the Bible or reading a passage from any sort of motivational book. Um,
Mhm.
all that, all that is part of the life alignment. It's not like I preach exercise and nutrition because I know that those are obviously huge hurdles that, as a society as a whole, that we need to work on. But we also need to work on the mindfulness. We need to work on hobbies and we need to work on our self care. I believe all of us do. And so um, I know approaching guys specifically about the the fitness and having a better body composition that works better for guys, but in our world that's not going to fly very far. We need to come at it with something a little more feminine, which is good. And then if you can get somebody started with a meditation ritual, then it the rest of it will build on that.
Oh,
You get
sure.
them, turned onto the right books, then and some people they'll figure it out. And if once you start to feel good, like that's when it really kicks in. Like once you start to get that little bit of momentum where you feel better than you did yesterday, and it's because of something that you did for yourself today, man. Now that gate's open, and you can go at it.
Yeah. So what have you noticed the difference between the male social workers and the female social workers? What have you noticed like as some of the major differences?
Uh, Man, that's a good question. I don't know, man. I feel like I don't know. I don't know if there is like a big difference as far. I know that everybody in the social work field, whether you're male or female, you're there because there's something about you that you want to help,
Mhm.
and uh, it doesn't mean that that everybody in the social work field is like soft hearted and weak, but there's just something about people that wake up every morning to go help other people, and they know that they're doing it can be at a detriment to themselves.
Sure.
So, I mean, as far as like just professionally, women are just the way guys and gals are, man. I mean, guys social workers are going to be a little more logical, a little more like going right at it. As
Mhm.
far as women are going to be a little more nurturing in the way that they approach their clients. But as far as like male social workers versus female social workers, they're all individuals, man. They're just like
Okay.
anybody else. You meet one, you've met one.
So I guess the better question is, and I'm gonna try to be as careful of this question as I can,
Okay.
is it's how do you help transform a social worker who has seen too much and who's been kind of succumbed to that negative energy, right? When a social worker has working day in, day out, 10, 12-hour days, as it can easily be working with people who have traumatic experiences and seeing people kind of relapse, seeing people who haven't gone as well, as better as they had maybe hoped, or have always seemed to be always in that constant struggle where they become a little bit disheartened, right? They started off ambitious. They started off like they're going to be a change agent, that they're going to help, help as many people as possible, and that this is their calling, and that their mother was a social worker, their father was a social worker, whomever, and this is almost that lineage. How do you help them with the ones who have been kind of disheartened by just the harshness of the job at times.
I would go back to the beginning and we would and just talk about especially if they're just really broken up about one specific client, then we need to go back and look at the victories and the wins that you've had with other clients,
Okay.
because it sucks, man, but not everybody can be saved. And the harsh reality is some of the people that we work with don't want to be. And you can't outwork the client. If
Okay.
you
Right.
are outworking them, then you're shorting someone else, because you're giving away this energy that is actually going to be reciprocated maybe with another client, and you're just, you wouldn't wake up in the morning and just start banging your head against the wall. And that's the same kind of thing. And I'm not saying that if you have a client that's not doing the work, that you
Right.
just shut them down, but you also have to, that's where your boundaries come in too. You have to know that, hey, this person's asked for this ride to this medical thing that they've needed 3 times, and all 3 times I've shown up and they weren't there.
Hmm.
Eventually you have to be like, look, man, I can't. You haven't been there 3 times. If you can come to me at the time you're supposed to be there, we'll make this happen. But I can't put more energy into this than you can. And that's what I would do, is just go back and start looking at the wins they did have, and then start talking about boundaries.
No, I love that because I was literally talking to someone today who person's going through a hard time. They lost a lot of family members. Unfortunately, some died by suicide and things like that. And this person said, because the person that I may not was in contact with them, but they literally said they're losing sleep over this.
Said you can't use any sleep. Said just you can't lose any sleep
Yeah,
over this.
well, the person said that they were like losing a lot of sleep over the
Oh,
client, the consumer, and things like that. So,
yeah, that's the nature of the beast, man. I
yeah,
mean, that's, you bought the ticket, take the rod, and that's one of the things that in this profession that we learn to deal with. We lose people from time to time, and
yeah.
it sucks. But just go back and think about a funny story you had with them, and remind other people of that funny story, and just try to remember them in the best light that you can. And that always helps.
Yeah, and I wish that would be talked a little bit more, like a little bit a lot more, is count the victories. Because I don't that's not really that's something I learned along the way through other people. That's something I don't think I ever heard in like a lecture or a webinar. Obviously I've been a part of a lot of them. Where you don't really focus a lot. Like count how many times you won versus lost. And winning just means how many times you had a connection with somebody. How many times someone, and this actually happened to me, someone was literally about to end their life and they called me. So, and we're able to get the police and everything, but it's like looking at those levels of impact and those level of wins that you saved one person's life. I always say, and this is a motto I had for many years, is impact one person at a time, one life at a time.
Hmm.
If you're helping one person today, you're making an impact in someone's life for the rest of their literally for the rest of their life.
Well, there's that, but there's also, if you make an impact on one person's life today, they're going to make an impact on other people's lives, and just that ripple effect of
Yeah.
what you did for this one person today. You may not ever know it, but the fact that that person called you and they didn't follow through on it, someone else may have talked to them about it, and he said, hey man, I called Zach today and he told me this. And then the person that he talks to is like, oh, that's a good point, and you just never know. Like, that just cascades out, and it touches a number of people that you'll never know.
Yeah, that's the key part. Is you'll really never know the level of impact you make in someone's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk about compounding, and most people talk about it like as far as money, but it works with positive energy and
Mhm.
compliments and everything else too.
Well, it's one of the key principles if we go into dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, is accumulating those positives.
And the more you get, the more the easier they come, and the easier they are to recognize.
Yeah. Well, we have to be so intentional and actually go out and look for it. I think some people have become blinded or distracted, honestly.
There's a lot of jaded like nihilism in social work, and it's and I put that with I consider like teachers and obviously guidance counselors, but teachers are a type of social worker as well.
Yeah.
And if you have a teacher that is just trying to get through their last, they know they got 3 years left to retirement, and they're dogging it, and they're not coming up with a new lesson plan, and they're not like trying to connect with their students, like that's a bad scene, and those students can feel that,
Oh, yeah.
and it radiates out from there. So yeah, I mean, it's about, you never know what kind of positive impact you're going to have just with the smallest thing of holding the door for somebody walking in the store in the morning could be the difference in that person's day. So just being aware of that, knowing that you don't have the first clue of what anyone else is going through, it's it's such a total game changer, like when you start to see everyone else like that.
Yeah, especially we can bring back that humanity aspect of it. And then not everyone's like a mind reader because no one is. I can't read your mind. You can't read my mind. And, I just want to take the time to appreciate all that you do for having a niche for social workers. I mean, that's such a huge heart that you have to make sure that the professionals who are taking care of other people who've been gifted that ability to take care of others, because it's a gift and responsibility, is now looking after other people.
And the more folks that we can look after, then that, like we are just talking about, that cascades out. And that's what is one of my favorite parts about it, is just realizing that it doesn't stop with the person that I'm talking to. It continues on after that.
Yeah, and just being that light and reducing that cloud of negativity and trying to figure out, is this person just releasing some negative energy, some frustrations, and trying to recognize, is this a frustration release or is this a habit, a pattern? Because if you, just like we talked about, if you have that neural pathway of negativity where you're always going to be kind of complaining about something, whether not only a procedure, a process, or because things change so much, especially in our world. I mean, some new legislation could just come about tomorrow and all of a sudden we're doing something differently.
Hmm.
I mean, that happened to my place of employment where we've had some changes and you just adjust to it. So developing that ability to cope with, like, okay, that's the new thing to do. Okay. Versus, and especially when we talk about kind of the negative side of impact and the influence that people have, is when one person complains, another person complains, another person complains, is being that central figure that doesn't, that just says, okay, well, we'll just figure it out. We'll all work together. We know everyone's stressed out and we'll be there. That way, kind of do that validation, let them know that their frustration's true, but also not allowing it to affect you. So when you have someone, like, how do you keep yourself aligned, which is good because it's part of your business, when someone's trying to get you to be a little bit more cynical or negative yourself? Like, do you say, like, what would you say to someone who goes, well, well, this person did this, and man, you'll be like this too one day, or you can't always be positive. Why are you so positive?
Cause Pollyanna or something like that,
Yeah.
rose colored glasses, that whole deal.
Yep.
I've actually, like, I'm pretty good about seeing where someone else is coming from. Like if there's a very cynical, negative, nihilistic person,
Sure.
and that we can just, I'd be, like, there's got to be, just start asking questions like, so
Okay.
when was the last client that you had to win? Uh, when was the last real connection you had with somebody? And then if you can get them thinking about it, and if, assuming they really want to, like, that's the first thing.
Right.
Like
And
the
we're
first
going, in
question,
this case, we're always going with the positive outlook, not the we don't
right?
want to be further pessimistic.
So if you can just start getting them to think about it, maybe because they're probably just really tied up in the last person they talked to,
Okay.
and recency bias. That's it's a thing, and so just starting to go on, be like, yeah, man, this one didn't work out. So there's going to be another one, and you can use what you learned this time around, and start stacking wins next time. or just like we talked about before, like just start going back a little ways and say, hey man, I remember you had this one client XYZ, that you were able to get into treatment, and then he got out and he's got a job and he's got an apartment now. And like, you haven't heard from that person, and that's good, because as social workers, like, our job is to put ourselves out of a job. If we do our
Right.
job, we don't have a job anymore.
Exactly.
And that's a good thing. Like, my job is to not talk to you anymore because you don't need me anymore. And so if you can come, at a colleague like that, that's just, maybe they're just having a bad day because they did have a client that wasn't, maybe didn't put in the effort that they thought they did, or they relapsed, or they ran off and then you didn't see them for months on end, or whatever it
Mhm.
is, then just kind of remind them, man, this isn't on you. This is you do what you do, and you've got wins stacked up in the past, and you can't live and die with every single client. You just have to go back and think about something positive, and then start over again.
I think that's really wise that you said that. Honestly, I think that's probably one of the wisest things you can do is not necessarily to challenge someone, but to inquire.
Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
you don't know what you don't know, and
Right.
just getting them to start getting their gears turning.
Yeah, and the best way to do that is a question because you can't argue a question.
Hmm.
So sometimes we can get annoyed with people who ask questions because that reveals your heart and what's really on your mind. And especially if you can say, get them in that positive direction, kind of guide them. So, like kind of with your train analogy, it might have taken 50,000, pressure of movement to go 30 miles an hour, but it starts with a little bit of turning, getting those gears turning. And then it's like, oh yeah, that person I've worked with them for 2 years, and they're always so happy when I saw them. And they made so much progress. They're using the coping skills. They went from not liking me at all to all of a sudden, oh man, I don't want to graduate. No. So I think that if we start focusing more on wins, I mean, that's such a good alignment too, is focus on your win. Especially as with all the research we know says for every one negative thought we have, we need four positive thoughts to counteract. And yes, some people need eight. That's just kind of an idea. How we say that's always an idea of how strong negativity is.
It really is, and it's strange that way, isn't it? That
Yes.
that it's like you're 4-1. That's brutal.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just another illustration of why we do need to just like start stacking wins and celebrate the small ones.
Mhm.
I mean, celebrate the small ones. Uh, what's what I'm looking for? Like, acknowledge the failures and what can I take away from it, and
Mhm.
then move on. And in golf, they give you, like, you have this little box behind the ball, and this is your time to think. And then, but once you're up to the ball, you're not thinking anymore. And so, like, what if you have a failure? You've got your 10, 15, 20 seconds, or in social work, you might have 10, 15, 20 minutes to run back through your case file and see what it is, where I
Mhm.
messed up, and then highlight that, make a note, and be like, all right, man, we're moving on. I've learned from it, and I'll do better next time.
Yeah. Because as long as they come back, there's always the next time.
Hmm. And just like everything else, what it was never as bad as you thought it was. Like, you're
Sure.
always your you're always your own worst enemy. You know exactly how you wanted it to go, and
Yeah.
so that's why you think it was a complete and utter failure, but they had no idea how you wanted it to go. So it might it might not have even been a failure at all as far as they're concerned, and you might be beating yourself up for nothing. But even if it was, it wasn't as bad as you thought it was. It never is.
No, it's true. I mean, we tend to be way too hard on ourselves, expecting us to be this, the perfect therapist, the perfect guidance counselor, and everything else. Where that's not the case. It takes thousands of hours to get good, and it's because you made 1,000 mistakes.
Hmm.
So, and one of the things to really focus on is you made a mistake. Good. Now you know what to not to do next time. As long as you listen to what you didn't do right.
Yes, be aware of where you messed up, make a note of it, make a physical note of it, make a mental
Yep.
note of it, and then just learn from it. That's all you can do every day is just wake up and learn something. If you didn't learn something today, then you did something wrong, man. If you don't learn something every single day, then you're not paying attention or you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, and I think, and that's why I always kind of use the word now. People are kind of more distracted, right? You can be distracted by the negativity, distracted by not taking the mental note, the written note down. Because how do you know what really happened unless you write things down?
Hmm.
And so I think that's why journaling is so important when it's done in a way where people understand the purpose of journaling. And this is something I noticed a lot with men, and this is honestly something that I had to take time to learn how to journal too because I didn't want to write down my thoughts and feelings for the day. Because to me, it was like a diary. Like, what's the purpose of this? I'm just going to write down. But when there was a goal, and I made this because I'm more, a man. When there was a goal in mind of what to write down, what to focus on. So if I wrote down a mistake I did, that kind of helped gear my focus into what did I learn from it? What can I do better?
Absolutely.
So, and still, I mean, still including the thoughts and feelings, but with intentionality. In a way, the therapy term would be really using your wise mind, where you're not necessarily ruled by emotions and the emotion mind, not in the logic mind, we just ruled by facts and logic, but when you combine the two, you provide a reason for your feelings, where you provide a reason for what happened, and then what's your prevention strategy? What's your strategy of what you're going to do next time?
When I first started journaling and I was doing it like you're talking about, like just like diary style, I found that I was really hit or miss. And the only time that I did it consistently is when
Hmm.
I was having consistent bad days. I
Okay,
wouldn't I wouldn't write about the good days I had because
interesting.
why would I? You know?
Sure.
And then you'd have a bad day. And then when you went back and what was the worst part about it was when I went back and read it, I would be like, damn, man, you had a bad day here, you had a bad day here, you had a bad day here. And then I would start looking at the dates and they would be all bunched for like 3 or 4 or 5 days in a row. And then I wouldn't write again for 2 weeks. Then it'd be
Hmm.
a bunch of bad stuff again. And then I have to think, well, what happened in those 2 weeks? And you're like, oh, well, I had good days those 2 weeks.
Right.
So I've kind of combined my journaling with my daily to-do list now. Like I've got
Nice.
like a habit tracker that's almost like a grade book that a teacher would have.
Okay.
I got four separate overarching goals, your fitness, your diet, work, and business. And you got 30 days and you got 3 or 4 action items that you have to take every day.
Right.
And diet, I'll put down, like if I just ate trash one day, I'll put an F down. If I ate
Oh.
great, I'll put an A down. If I did this, some action items are pass fail. So you just either write a yes or a no
Ooh,
because you
sounds like
did
a
it.
college professor. Either you passed or you failed it.
Yeah. And then so I have that, and then I kind of pull things over from a master list, what needs to be done. I've got a running list of everything that needs to be done, and then you put those on your to-do list for the day, and then I kind of go back and reflect at the end of the day, and then that way I get the good and the bad.
Mm.
I know that I finished this task, this task, this task, and it led to this outcome. I know that I missed a workout this morning, and then I had garbage for breakfast, and then once I had garbage for breakfast, I was really down in the dump, so it just snowballed. And so
Right.
at the end of the day, I can see, hey man, I hit this one, this mark, I hit this benchmark, I missed this one, and it caused a downfall here. And then I have a more full, a better picture of what life actually was, as opposed to just like when I was writing it out in diary form, I would only write when I was mad, and I took it for granted that I had good days in between.
No, I think it's an awesome transformation that you recognize, and that's the whole purpose too, is to recognize the successes, the wins that you're having, and to recognize that you need to make some adjustments, whether that's doing a pass fail, giving yourself a grade, and just having that honesty with yourself. So as we kind of wrap up a little bit, in like a minute, what would you like to tell someone today, a male social worker who's struggling and needs some guidance? What would you tell them today?
It's There was a question a long time ago that there was Derek Sievers. You know who Derek Sievers is? He's written a couple books. He's been on Tim Ferriss's show a little bit, but
Okay.
they asked him one time, if you had a big billboard that a billion people every day would see, what would you put on it? And mine always comes from the Aldous Huxley book Island. Do you know that book?
No, I don't.
Okay, so it's a book about, well, no, there's an island, and this island is it's a great place to live, and they've trained these birds, all the birds in the jungle. They train the birds to say, attention and here and now, boys. And so as you're walking through the jungle, the birds are constantly keeping you mindful. They're keeping you present. Okay. And so if I had a billboard or just a message to give to everybody, it would just be present, be mindful, and don't take your losses too hard, and stack your wins starting in the morning. But always be mindful and be present, because you can get to the bottom of anything as long as you're paying attention and being mindful.
Man, being the present, being mindful, and being intentional. Just having that focus straight there. You have to send me all this book information, because I love reading.
Okay.
And always want to add to my repertoire. So if you're a social worker and you need a little bit of help, you feel a little bit burned out, feel like you're on empty, well, Tyson's the guy to go to. So you can follow him. He's on X. I'll put all his contact information, his website, his services in the description below. So just know, if you're a social worker, you don't need to struggle. It's okay to seek out help. I mean, as mental health professionals ourselves, we know the burdens that you're facing. We know the loneliness it can be. You're trying the best you can. You're reading all the books. You're going to all the seminars. Sometimes you need someone in your corner, and Tyson's the guy to help you out in that corner, help get your life aligned. He's a life alignment coach. So he will get your life aligned. And if you're a male and you need a little bit of guidance yourself, also in the description below will be a Discord group I run. It's called the Men's Lifeline Academy, and where we focus on helping encourage men live the best life possible. So we have 2 great resources, but check them out first, since we always love to serve people and support the businesses. So his information would be the first, so as a way of giving back, especially with him giving his time to become on this podcast. Tyson, thank you so much for being on the podcast for the Men's Life Academy podcast. And I just hope you have a blessed day.
Thank you, Zach. It was a blast.
All right. Take care, man.